Welcome to episode 23 of Leader Podcast. Today on Leader, Tara and Peymon from MALCOVA, the team that's literally disrupting mammography for women with dense breast tissue. Quick hits and big insights. Let's get into the episode. Welcome to episode 23. I'm pleased to have two of my favorite clients, literally of all time, a husband and wife, Tara Ghazi and Peymon Ghazi of MALCOVA. Thrilled to have you guys on Leader Podcast today.
Fantastic, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. All right. Well, perfect. We've got so much to talk about. I think we should always start with how we know each other. And I think it's an interesting story. So let's talk about that and then we'll get right into it. So I'll start. I think I stalked Tara on LinkedIn, which is usually what I do. Maybe last year. And her and I had like a little bit of an exchange, and then ultimately kind of went silent for a minute. And then at the start of the year, I think you re-engaged and said, hey, we might need something. I think it started out with like a pitch deck or something like that. And then it ended up being a much bigger conversation and relationship. So that's what I recall and how we know each other. We worked on your brand website and pitch deck, but you tell me if there's a different story.
Yeah, I know. I think that's pretty spot on. We had been operating somewhat in, not full on stealth mode, but being pretty under the radar for quite some time. And Stephanie, I remember Tribe had crossed my radar because you were pretty active in the medical device space and the industry where we are. And I really liked the quality of what you had done, but we weren't quite ready to dive into a project. And when we'd connected, I think it was right around the time that we'd attended a pretty large annual event that goes on in the industry. And it was really clear, okay, it's time for us to get in, refresh this brand of ours that was getting a bit stale and old. And yeah, we were so grateful you were there. And we hadn't intended to go quite as far, I think, initially when we engaged. But
I have that effect on people. Oh, no, it ended up working out. I think the end product, we can talk about it a little bit, but I think the end product was phenomenal. I think it definitely gave you guys what you need to catapult yourselves into this industry. And so before we get into your company, which I definitely want to talk about today, let's talk about just your journey to present day. What are your backgrounds? How did you get here? And we'll kind of go from there.
I kind of grew up in radiology. I went to graduate school in radiology. I did my PhD in there, and specifically in breast cancer radiology. And as I was going through in graduate school, you learn a lot of things. One of the things that you learn is that what doesn't work, but it's not whole lot of focus on how to bring out something new. It's all about teaching, which is understandable. It's you're a student. You're there to learn something. When I was in graduate school at UC Davis, they have a program. Back then, it was a small program that it's a fellowship. They give you a fellowship program to. It was a fellowship program that let you take some of the MBA courses, the business school courses. And from my background, which was in science and engineering, physics, it was attractive. I was just curious about it, so I applied for it, and I got into a program. And I started going through the business courses with the MBA students, which opened a whole new door to me. I was curious about this, getting into the business. I knew after graduate school, I would not be willing to go through the academic path. I grew up in an academic family. I knew that was not something I wanted to follow. My dad is a professor now; he's retired. Was a professor, so that's not something I wanted to do. Not that I don't have respect; I have a lot of respect for it. But I knew the lifestyle, and that's not something I wanted to do. Went through the business school courses and came out of it knowing that I wanted to become an entrepreneur at some point. After that, I got a couple of jobs in the valley, in Silicon Valley, and then Tara, my wife, she decided she comes from a long, I'm sure she will share that she comes from many years of being in industry. She decided to go back to academia and do her PhD, go back to science. So she did something that completely opposite of me. I went through science first and then got into industry. She was reverse. She got into Johns Hopkins University. We moved to Baltimore. And as she was doing her PhD, and I couldn't find a job in Baltimore, frankly, to be honest with you, I had an idea in my mind about a new design for CT scans, or the way that the CT imaging is done. And I started doing the simulations. I shared the idea with Tara, and we started from get-go developing it together. And fast forward 2 years, we started the company. We filed the patents, secured the original intellectual property of it, and set up shop, got a place in Baltimore, build the prototypes. And slowly, as Tara was wrapping up her PhD, we started having conversation about seriously becoming co-founders
Wow.
as married couple. And we had long conversations about this. At the same time, it was during the pandemic. We
Mm.
had our first child. It was just messy.
Wow.
In a way, actually, I kind of missed that messy period of our
Yeah.
professional life. But everything worked out. So you asked me to tell you a little bit of background story. That's how it started.
Mhm.
From an idea, literally, we're truly a startup on the basement building just idea simulations and building prototypes from new way of doing science, from ideation to prototyping, and now we're going to the clinical trial phase.
Tara, what's your origin story? What's your background? I know Peymon had mentioned, your PhD, but again, how did this manifest into your current business?
Yeah, so I think I will go. Payment didn't go all the way back, but I will touch a little bit in childhood because I think that relates a great deal to
Mhm.
aspects of just my character and who I am. So I was raised by a single mother. I was one of those kids who had a lot of responsibility pretty early on, one of three girls. And I think that really shaped me growing up to not even think about taking responsibility and ownership for things, but just being kind of the one who would certainly dive in, step up to get things done. And that really shaped my professional life early on. So it was not infrequent that even in my earliest stage career positions, I'd be very much be moved into positions that were of leadership and maybe supervision over others. And that was in a lot of ways simply because I wasn't afraid to just step up and have a voice and be responsible for things. And I
Mhm.
think that's pretty important, character trait in doing it. As Payman mentioned, so I had a career path that, wasn't feeding my soul as much, that I was
Mhm.
getting a lot of skill in, had a lot of, operations experience, managing people, exposure to finance. But I, really wanted to dive back into my passion and thankfully had, a spouse and Payman who was highly supportive of that. And I was, very keen on what he was doing. My scientific expertise, I was very interested in really getting under the hood, so to speak, with humans. So I just was very fascinated by the brain, wanted to understand much more about how we function as humans, and importantly, how we do kind of these targeted professional things we do. So I was very interested in the visual domain with people and understanding really what the brain basis is. So the field that I dove into for my PhD was cognitive neuroscience. Uh, and while I was going through my PhD, because I had a natural inclination towards visual information, and Payman being my spouse, we talked so deeply about what he was doing. I was very interested in diving deep. And, during my PhD, then I had an experience where I had to interface directly with breast imaging at a younger age than many women would go through. And so it gave me this firsthand insight into the patient experience. And it was a very interesting, professional background that each of us had and kind of scientific domain. And because I had this, sense of desiring to step up and make change, it was really a motivation for me to join forces with Peymon as co-founder and try and do something different. It was also very motivating for me to be able to, reflect on just simply identifying as a woman, being in this space, seeing how much need there was for change in this field. The standard of care technologies, I got to experience them firsthand, go through imaging and see what's available. And you realize how much the patient, their experience sometimes can take a second seat, to the primary clinical aims. And it was really my goal in joining Peymon as co-founder to make sure that always, I was also representing not just the scientific or professional experience, but also that, representing the voice of the woman there in everything that we do. So yeah, that was a bit of my journey to the present.
Well, I have to commend you both because I don't think I could work with my husband. I love him dearly. We're actually having our 25th anniversary in October. So he's amazing, but that takes a lot to, as Peymon described, go through a pandemic, have your first child, launch your own company, and work together as spouses. That is a lot. And I think you guys do it very well, or at least from my lens, you're super passionate about what you do. Nothing's by coincidence. Everything's with intention. And we saw that, the tribe, we reflect on you all often, that you're just so intentional. And so, my thought, just looking forward to the future, you have nowhere to go but up. You have, such a runway ahead of you of opportunity. And I know because the intention is so pure and so, focused on doing the right thing for your patients, that you're going to be wildly successful. So thank you again for joining us today. Let's talk about MALCOVA, because I think it's important what you're trying to do and taking those passions and those origin stories from your childhood and really bringing it into an opportunity to do better for patients. So let's talk about what makes, I know because I worked with you on your brand, but what makes MALCOVA unique and what are you trying to solve for? What is the unmet need in the market that you feel you all could move forward with MALCOVA?
Yeah, as Peymon mentioned in his own journey to the present, I think one thing that he won't have highlighted so much because he's not on the outside, watching him, is that he was not afraid to innovate and look at the status quo and identify some problems in it because he had such intimate experience with the industry and not just that, but very critically with the technology. So the imaging technologies that are used, in our field and specifically what we work with, he was really deep into the roots of the origin stories of those technologies, the practice of them, and was not afraid to step outside and look at these and say, these are amazing, they're incredibly powerful, they solve a lot of problems, but we can do better. And to innovate in that type of way. And, we are a little bit out of the box in that, as you said, husband and wife, we have different expertise, decided to work together. I think that, it's part of who we are to communicate strongly, but be very honest and very critical at every step in the way. And so having those early conversations about truly, where are the needs? What are the problems with the technology? And then, joining in background to be able to work to affect change. So on Peymon's side, really deeply seeing that the simple physics and the engineering, these can be different, these can be better, and we know the inherent flaws or weaknesses, right, that are holding the technology back. From my perspective, really strongly looking at the human side of things. Here's what these devices provide to physicians. We have such immense respect for radiologists, the physicians who are trying to provide care for patients. And we really look at the incredibly hard task that they have, day in and day out of trying to just serve, so many people, their various needs, trying to do the best for them. And they're really just using the tools that are available in their arsenal. And we really see ourselves as working, and trying to think about how can we just simply deliver a better tool to them and not just think about them, but also think about that patient and the patient experience so that we're delivering something that's better for everybody. That's really critical. So that's, in the abstract and the big picture, something that, is really important to us and really just shapes, our culture and our mission.
The question was, what is the basically the problem?
Yeah.
What is the unmet needs? And
Yes.
it's and in radiology, which is our market,
Mhm.
radiology, and our neighboring market, which is radiation oncology. um, the practice is that once we know where the disease is, once we know what the disease is, and then we have amazing technologies to go after, both in radiology and oncology, or in case of cancer. So if we know where the cancer is, or if we know where the stroke is, we know where the problem is, we have all amazing tools to throw at it. But detecting where the disease is and detecting where the problem, what kind of problem is the first step. You can think of it as a screening problem. That's where the imaging is not in some of the indications we are going after. That's not where the imaging is advanced enough. And
Mm.
that's where the unmet needs, for instance, in the case of breast cancer detection, there's huge unmet need for finding cancer in half of women who have dense breast tissue.
Mhm.
Finding cancer. Once we find cancer, we have amazing technology. We throw everything at it. But then finding cancer is something that is tricky. The same is true about the stroke detection. I know if somebody has a tiny little stroke, the first round of screening, the patient has huge limitations. But once we know where the stroke is, once we know where the problem is, we throw everything at it. It's the US, so we have amazing technologies, amazing healthcare system to go after it. So we are going through the first round, we call it frontline imaging, the first round of imaging that is used for finding where the problem is. And that's where we invented something new. We innovated.
So I know, and share what you want about this, but your beachhead, I know you're early in your development and pre-commercial at this point, but your beachhead approach is going to land somewhere in the patient population of those patients with dense breast tissue. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really in our population in the US. It's such a diverse, heterogeneous, we say, population that, as Payman mentioned, up to 50% of women in the US have dense breasts. And only recently has there been a wave of, informing women a bit about this. So more and more women, thankfully, are becoming aware, if this applies to them or not. Uh, there's been, this sad trend of, unfortunately, and it's not just in the US, it's in many countries, breast cancer occurrence happening earlier and earlier in life. So it's
Mhm.
no longer something that, women can afford to just think about when they're, oh, I'm in my 60s, my 70s, then I'll start thinking about this. No, that's why current recommendations are that women start breast cancer screening at 40. And the younger you are, the more likely you are to have dense breasts. But that's, breast density is kind of a not due to anything that's under your control, really. There's a lot of
Mhm.
genetic factors, just life factors, and you won't necessarily know it until you go in for imaging.
Mhm.
And that's where our current, standard of care at the front line it doesn't serve women very effectively at all. It can be very hard with these standard of care modalities to detect cancer early in women with dense breasts. So that's really who we are trying to solve the need for.
Yeah. And so for the lay audience, anyone who's not in the medical world, dense breast tissue has a clinical implication of not finding the cancer, correct?
Yeah, and so there's nothing, having dense breast tissue, it's a very simple term, using the word dense that we just put to basically, if you think of the breast as an organ for, a woman, it really, it's a functional purpose, can be to support breastfeeding, in that woman. And that's, there's a certain type of tissue that develops in every woman, when she goes through puberty and into adulthood, and that tissue uh, shows up on imaging as dense. Okay, and so this is completely normal, healthy tissue, and in some women, it takes up a larger portion of their breast volume than in other women, and that can have a range of factors. You don't need to have had a child. For some women, it is because they had a child. Every woman is unique, and their tissue composition is unique. And we use that term only because it has this implication clinically that if you have a significant amount of this dense, normal, functional, healthy tissue in your breast, it can really hide and obscure signals that might be cancer. And so it can make cancer really hard to detect.
Right.
There's also a risk factor because cancer likes to grow within the tissue that is responsible for producing milk and transferring the milk to the nipple. So not only the dense breast tissue, as Tara said, hides cancer, it's a risk factor. In
Mm,
other words, it's more likely for the women who have dense breast tissue to develop cancer.
okay. I know when we were working with your brand and your website, there was a notion around this twin imaging. Can you talk to us in a lay place? I kind of understand, but I thought when Peymon, or maybe it was you, Tara, were explaining it to us, it seemed really unique comparative to other breast imaging platforms.
Yeah, so we have an approach that we describe as paired twins that are digital and physical. And for the
Mhm.
layperson, we have our own uh, approach to the use of AI technology. And that's really, I think, we'll probably touch on this a little bit more, but, we can talk about how that is going to be the future of
Mhm.
radiology. We've really focused in two areas. One, the core technology that performs the imaging, developing something that does a much better job and is much more comfortable. That's been our aim. But then we have also worked on development of our twin technology, and that in large part is to really accelerate our ability to work towards AI development. So even people who are not strongly in that space will likely have heard that AI requires data. And in most cases, the more data you have, the better that AI can
Mhm.
respond. Just like humans, right? We go through our entire life and we're getting all kinds of input. We're learning, we're changing, we're making judgments based on that. And the older we get in our life, maybe the better we get at making those judgments and the more information we have access to. When we talk about AI or artificial intelligence, and we think about trying to train that to make good decisions and to be an effective tool for us, we're not constrained by years of a lifetime, but it's really about the amount of information that we can give it and the quality that of the output that it'll provide in return. And so that our twin technology is really about advancing that and accelerating our development.
So, in addition to using AI, obviously with your paired twin technology, I think you had mentioned previously, and tell me if I'm wrong, but there's a reduction in exposure to radiation as well through that process, right? Like the patient implication is favorable.
Yes, exactly. So there are two sides to that question. One is the radiation dose that is introduced to the patient. A woman, for instance, that is going through a breast cancer screening, there is radiation exposure.
Mhm, mhm,
And we have mandated in the US, we have laws in the book that says the radiation exposure to a particular patient that is called the average size patient, average density. This should be the number, and there's a specific number that mandates all the imaging modality mammography used for breast cancer screening should abide by that number. So we are well below that cap. So radiation dose that we introduce to the patient using our breast imaging device is well below that. So we're proud of that. It's quite a task to pull off, be honest with you, to develop a dimensional imaging modality close to CT that that has that feature. So that's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is for years and years, whenever we in our market in radiology, whenever somebody developed an imaging modality, they need to go through the clinical trial in many cases, especially about breast cancer detection. And that requires a lot of patients, a lot of volunteers to be recruited to the clinical trial program. And they're going to they're going to be imaged, and the results will tell if the device is effective or not effective, or is it safe or is not safe. So that's just a normal clinical trial that devices go through. During that clinical trial, of course, we introduce radiation dose to the people who are signing up for this program. That's an added risk to these volunteers. One of the benefits of this digital twins, digital physical twins, the twins that we've developed, is that that's something that we're pushing very aggressively, is to develop a true surrogate for real humans. Imagine a device that looks like a breast, has the different tissue types in a breast that a real human, a real female has, with the where over time also is not only the anatomy, also the physiology of it. If we can represent that in a physical object in one of those twins, we're hoping that that could be used as a replacement for those volunteers or for the patients that go through the clinical trial, which is, frankly, it's the riskiest part of bringing the product out to market. So what we are trying to do, and we're doing it in collaboration with FDA, is that hopefully we can bring out a replacement for these large volumes of patients that need to go be recruited to go through the clinical trial. Not only reduces the risk to the patients that are going through this program, also it unlocks all kinds of possibilities for the innovative ideas because it reduces the cost. The most expensive, the most capital consuming, the most time consuming part of this whole clinical trial is recruiting patients, recruiting people to go through the clinical trial. In my opinion, it may have the same impact that mRNA had, my mRNA revolution had in the vaccine development, that shortened the path of clinical trials for vaccines. There was a reason that these vaccines developed for COVID pandemic, they came out so fast because we changed the way that we practice the clinical trial. Why can we not have the similar impact in radiology and reduce the path to market and lower the burden? It allows other more innovative ideas and for smaller companies to come to market, and not just being the market being consolidated by a few major players.
Yeah.
It just democratizes the market.
So what is the North Star for MALCOVA? I know you've got a lot of plans and you've got a bunch of different directions you could take this technology, but if you did everything correctly, what does good look like for you?
We are really excited that we're moving into, as Peymon mentioned before, really the clinical phase of development for our device. So we'll be moving into patient imaging this year. And our goal is really, as the conversation started off, to provide a much more effective solution for that very front line of imaging, screening, the very, very beginning. Not to simply be another imaging tool in the suite of diagnostic tools that the physician has available after screening when you already know there's a problem, but to really help make change at that front line. So we'd like to really be going after replacement for what has been the standard of care for decades. Mammography has been the standard technology that's been used for imaging for women for an incredibly long amount of time. And, for good reason. It for about half of women, it has done a credible service, right? It has saved an incredible number of lives. It's increased awareness, just helped. But for the other half of women, it's just not doing the job. It's not effective. And for many women, mammography can be uncomfortable. And interestingly, many studies have shown that the more dense your breasts are, the increased density, there's a relationship between the amount of discomfort, and sometimes for women, they'll experience pain. And so it's not uncommon to, talk to women in a room and they'll just say, not my favorite procedure to go through, right? So on one hand, right, we are really advocates that, women take advantage of what's available today, right? And that they're, really trying to take care of their own health. So we don't want to dissuade anybody, from using the technologies that are there. But our goal is really just to displace the technology that's been ineffective for this particular category of women for far too long, and do something that's incredibly comfortable, that's not a fearful procedure to go through, and that gets the job done early.
I don't enjoy getting mammograms. I really don't. I understand there's value in that. And I do believe an early detection on anything is better than just waiting and seeing what happens. Because by the time you actually find cancer on your own without screening tools, like we said, the stage becomes an issue. And I have friends that actually are going through that struggle right now. And so I'm a big advocate of always knowing what's going on inside your body as much as you have access to. Making holding yourself accountable to screenings, as uncomfortable as they currently are. These guys are working on innovating, so it won't be too long before it'll be more comfortable. And I know it's not stopping with the breast. You've got plans of reinventing, quite a bit of the imaging landscape. But I do have a question, moving away a little bit from MALCOVA and more in this imaging industry, because I've seen it popping up a ton on my social media because I kind of search for things like this. So I'm probably profiled, but this whole body scan concept. What are your thoughts on that industry and the value that it may or may not have for patients wanting to take a more proactive measure in identifying early diagnosis or early disease, throughout your body? What are your thoughts? I'm really curious actually about that.
I think it's a really interesting phenomenon that reflects the feeling that a lot of people have that the only way, they can get effective care is to take things into their own hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just reflective of a trend, that's been occurring over time. It's a complicated health world we live in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's body is unique, their personal circumstances are unique, and there's a lot of pressure and strain placed on physicians. The way that things are practiced today is sometimes it's just impossible, burden and tasks and expectations that are put on physicians to do things. So I think it's an interesting thing that's reflecting this, that people, are saying, hey, I want to know, right? I don't feel that I'm getting enough care with what the system I have access to. So, well, I'm gonna go after it myself and be able to do this. It's from the scientific perspective, right? We you want to exercise caution, and it's really critical to not be interpreting things on your own. You need that expert. You really need that physician because there is harm that can come from misdiagnosis, overdiagnosis, thinking things are there when they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, in the past, physicians have taken this paternalistic method of trying to protect patients from that information. And so it's just reflective of this tension, that's really active today.
Mm-hmm.
In our space, we exercise caution with that as well, because the whole body scan is amazing, but it has some limitations in what it can detect. And some of the earliest stages of breast cancer for image, for example, that we're after, it's not necessarily going to be the tool that's going to catch that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you, on one hand, you want to caution people against like a false sense of security. But on the other hand, completely understand, right? People want some access to empowerment, to feel like they can get more information about their health. And then there are stories, of course, where it's been, absolutely fantastic thing that somebody went through imaging.
Life-changing. Yeah.
I remember what Tara said, that yes, false negative reads are bad. So if you have cancer and you miss it, that's bad. But false positive is also harm. Putting a patient through the diagnostic journey, even doing intervention on a disease that may not have been something aggressive, may not maybe just like a tiny little cancer, it just grow and stays there. That we are organic ecosystem in our body, so our body goes through all kinds of things, all kinds of lumps and this and that happen in our body, come up and they disappear. Not all of them are cancer. So the concern within the radiology field is that a lot of these have happened that result in false positives. What it means that a lot of patients that come to the physician's office are like, hey, I saw this in my MRI. I'm really concerned about this, and force the patient to put them through the path. And of course, the patient wants to do it. You have to do it. It is what it is. So it will tax the system. I will put out one thing though. It's a luxury to have access to spend out of pocket $3,000 to on something like this. I mean,
Yeah.
98 or 99% of people in our country, which is the most advanced country, the wealthy country in the world, don't have access to this. So
Right.
it's not a serious solution for
Yeah.
general population in screening. It's not a serious solution for finding cancer. One last thing, again, I echo what Tara said. Resolution of MRI is quite subpar to resolution of mammography.
Mm-hmm.
It's all hold. If you want to find cancer, it's all about finding tiny little details at the very early stage. The prognosis is much, much better if you find cancer at early stages. When
Right.
you use MRI, especially without contrast injection, the only way that you can see something when it's a big lump, and probably at that point you have already it's palpable. You can feel it, and the cancer has grown into a phase that doesn't have a good prognosis for the patient.
So because you guys are in this world, in this radiology world, what do you think is the next up and coming, especially with the advancement of AI? And I know AI is really booming in the consumer world and in the business world more for utility of operations and automations, but I guarantee it's applying to all medical innovation as well. What do you think is next up with respect to the evolution of AI and how it could contribute to imaging?
Yeah, absolutely. So one really critical distinction about how we use AI and how we're increasingly, it's become so common now, I mean, it's not even a year, right? And well, many of us are just, chat GPT is a daily thing.
Everything. I know. I
Yeah,
talk to ChatGPT more than I talk to half my family members.
Uh, a critical distinction when you get into the medical space is that you can't afford mistakes.
Mhm.
You can't afford inaccuracies. You can't afford to rely on tools that might lead you in the wrong direction. When it comes to imaging, I think anybody who's cared enough to follow, media on AI and imaging, the term hallucinations won't be too
Mhm.
unfamiliar. If you're trying to create your own images, sometimes some crazy things happen. And
Mhm.
in the medical space, in order to incorporate AI, you can't have that, right? You can't afford that, and so there's an entirely different bar. So spaces that it's very clear AI is going to help a lot are things that help reduce the volume and burden that the medical system faces. And that's kind of leads even up to the imaging. So when you're talking about scheduling, transcribing, recording things, just taking care, the same way that ChatGPT can help us, compose that 1,000 words much quicker, and edit it. It'll help, in the medical space doing the same thing. In imaging, really what we're very excited about and what we also are pretty driven, in our discussion of twins earlier to get ahead of the AI development curve on it is to really move towards where the future is. And that is in helping to what you describe as triage, imaging cases. So when you have a huge volume of people going through image-based screening, as you have with mammography, the current practice is that there's a highly trained physician called a radiologist that's reading and looking and spending time with each and every image. And the truth is that the beyond the vast majority of patients have no cancer, right? There's
Mhm.
nothing of concern there, and year after year, that may be the case for them. And so, really, the future is going to be to help set aside those cases that really are needing that expert's attention on them, and to be able to help, as a start, prioritize the workflow for
Mhm.
physicians to kind of, maybe we are deferring these cases that AI has determined are very likely,
Low risk.
problematic, low
Right.
risk. We'll still have the physician get to them, but it's not that I need to be reading it right now because I might need to take action. And helping prioritize that, because it's all about, if we can detect it early and we can get you to care and treatment early, right, the outcomes are going to be great. But it's,
Mhm.
if we're delaying that process simply because, your imaging case is at the, the bottom of a huge heap, right, that's a problem. And so
Yeah.
AI has huge potential to help in that area.
I'm super excited about the future. I know some people are weary of the future of AI, but I think if used in the right way and in the right hands, it can be extremely productive, potentially even solve for cancer, in general. We'll see. Well, listen, I want to give you guys the opportunity to do a fun lightning round, which I do with every guest on Leader Podcast. So hopefully you're open and willing, but in no particular order, I want to know from both of you a mentor that you'd like to pay it forward or just give a shout out to. a superpower. And if you say you don't have one, I'm going to disagree. Everyone has a superpower. And then also just a book recommendation, whether it's a business book or not, something that's made an impact on you. Our audience are made up largely of people just like yourself. So I always want to share knowledge that made an impact on you and hopefully pay it forward. So either one of you can start.
So when it comes to acknowledgement of a mentor, I will say I would love to acknowledge my PhD advisor. She passed away early and untimely about a year ago. Dr. Susan Courtney, she was at Johns Hopkins University for an extended period of time. Really broke ground in new science and imaging science in particular, using imaging to study the human brain, and was a fantastic advisor to work under. So.
John, same with me. Dr. John Boone, my PhD advisor at UC Davis.
Got it.
Truly a mentor.
Okay. What about superpowers? I bet you could answer it for each other. Probably better than yourself. What about
that's
you?
actually fun. Let's do
Yeah,
that.
let's do it.
I will tell you what your superpower is, and that is attention to details.
I will say his
Sometimes
superpower.
annoying, but but it's good. Yeah. Good.
In-person interaction with a diverse range of humans. Peymon's really fantastic about that. Young, old, no matter what the background. Yeah, you get him in person and he just charms people left and right.
I completely agree with both of your perspectives, actually. Having worked with you for a minute, I can see the attention to detail for Tara. And then I also see Peymon's never met a stranger from day one. And it works. Actually, your dynamic is so interesting because it's like the yin and the yang, which, for employees of your company are going to really benefit from that because you guys really make a whole. And that's the whole goal of every relationship, whether it's business or personal. Okay. And so then lastly, book recommendations.
I will say I came to this book, later than it was published, but in the last year I read The Art of Learning by Josh Wade Singh, and this was just such a phenomenal book, really incredible, by somebody who's very introspective, very high achieving human being, and just shared a lot of insights in his own journey and how to really live with art present.
Love it. What about you, Peymon?
Moneyball. I've read the book 10 times. I've seen the movie 10 times. It's about the story of Oakland A's in 2002 season, how they reinvented baseball, and how we think about baseball. It's an amazing book. I do during our work. I go back to it so many times. It's crazy. Moneyball.
I saw the movie. Remind me who the actor was.
Brad Pitt.
Oh, Brad Pitt. How do I forget? No one can forget Brad Pitt. Well, those are good perspectives. I knew you guys would have some interesting answers. So again, thank you guys so much for taking time. I know starting a company and building an innovation, it's not only, as Peymon described, it can be messy at times, but it's also time consuming. And for you guys to take time out of your schedule to be on Leader, I really do appreciate it. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you guys at a different level and also just having you on the podcast today. I am extremely favorable towards the future of MALCOVA. So how is someone able to get a hold of you if they'd like to? What's the best place to find you?
Oh, lovely. We're both on LinkedIn. Very happy to reach out there. And then on our website.
Our beautiful website. Yeah. I mean, return the favor. I mean, you guys did an amazing job. Really amazing job. And the whole experience was great. Professional, communicative. It was great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, guys, thank you so much. I will obviously be in touch, but thank you for being on. I'm looking forward to the future, as I mentioned, of MALCOVA. I applaud you for doing things differently, being disruptive, making it happen. So please, obviously, keep in touch. We'll obviously follow your journey, but thanks again.
Thanks so much, Stephanie.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leader Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, please take a moment to subscribe, share, and leave a comment so more listeners can find us. Interested in sharing your own story on Leader Podcast or looking to elevate your brand and marketing efforts with Tribe Agency? Visit us at tribeagency.org/contact to get in touch. We value your engagement and look forward to growing with you. Don't forget to follow Leader Podcast for more inspiring episodes like this. Thanks again, and see you next time.